Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Justice Without Execution. We are so excited that you have decided to join us tonight for this important conversation with our inspiring guests. If you haven't checked in yet and you are a Rhodes student, we ask that you please check in with Ben Hayes in the lobby and make sure to grab some pizza, please. My name is Amelia Rush, and this is Mitchell Leander, and we are your Just City Advocates co-presidents.
Just City Advocates is the on-campus chapter of Just City. Just City does some wonderful, wonderful work in the community, including, but not limited to, our wonderful community bail fund, our court watch program, our clean slate expungement program, ongoing advocacy, and ongoing legislation work right here in Memphis.
At Just City Advocates, we're committing to informing, organizing, and mobilizing Rhodes students to organize a fairer, smaller, and more humane criminal legal system.
Our student group works to advance criminal justice reform right here in Memphis, continuing that mission of Just City. We support restorative approaches and amplify the voices of those that are most impacted by our system.
Of course, the death penalty represents one of the harshest impacts of our criminal legal system. Mitchell and I realized that JCA needed to organize against the death penalty when Governor Lee resumed executions in the state over this past summer. In May of 2022, Governor Lee had previously halted all executions because the state had violated its own drug testing requirements.
This summer, however, executions resumed with no court review. The state's new lethal injection protocol uses these same drugs without safeguards like proper testing, storage requirements, or medical oversight. These are the same failures that caused the pause in the first place and are continuing to raise constitutional concerns.
Tonight, we care deeply about open and honest dialogue, including dissent and pushback. We're not here to indoctrinate or persuade you. Our goal is to create a space that for those who are directly impacted by the death penalty to share their experiences and their reasons for organizing against it.
Our role on campus is to connect students with this very mission. We organize events like tonight's to raise awareness, spark dialogue, and to build a community of students who want to make the justice system more just. No matter your political affiliation or beliefs, JCA believes no person should be subjected to state execution, especially under these conditions.
Our hope for tonight is that we can all leave with a better understanding of the death penalty in our state, and that we can make a commitment to join in solidarity to urge Governor Lee to halt all executions before Harold Nichols' clemency scheduled for December 11th.
And with no further ado, I promise we are so honored to be joined by and to introduce you to our wonderful, wonderful three guests, Stacy, Sabrina, and Cynthia. Thank you all so much for being here.
And to formally introduce you to Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty Director and Rhodes alum, Stacy Rector.
If I use this, maybe I should use
this.
Yeah, okay. Thank y'all so much. I mean, what an introduction. Amazing. You all are so with it. They have been a dream to work with to get prepared for this. So I'm so grateful to Amelia and Mitchell, to the Just City Advocates here at Rhodes College, to the Spence Wilson Center for Interdisciplinary Humanities, who sponsored the event, and to all of you. For your attendance this afternoon. Blunt Auditorium was actually around when I was here many moons ago, and I'm grateful that I could find it. So that was good too. And as Mitchell and Amelia mentioned, we obviously know we're in a time when there is at least a perceived difference, if you will, in many of our positions on a lot of things these days, where people seem to be very siloed. Very sort of having allegiance to a particular position and not really moving very much from that. I'm happy to say that in the area of the death penalty, we've seen real changes over the years. We've seen a lot of movement. Regardless of folks' political beliefs, religious beliefs, we have seen growth and change in the way that people are approaching the death penalty. So regardless of where you are, and I would imagine there are folks here that are all over the place when it comes to this issue, I believe that we have far more in common than we disagree on. So hopefully some of that will come to light as we hear these stories tonight. Most of us, I believe, want the same things from our legal system. We want to see murder victims' family members supported in the aftermath of violence. We want them to have legal finality as soon as possible. We want accountability when a murder has occurred. We want our communities to be safe, right? These are all things we can agree on. We want a system that is fair and that is accurate, not just for some folks, but for everybody. We want to be good stewards of our resources, our tax dollars. We want those to go to policies and programs that are the most impactful, the most effective. I think we can all, am I seeing nods? Most of us can say yes. These are all things that we agree on. This is common ground that we share. And I think if we can find our way through some of the differences to a place where what we're focusing on are these common concerns, right, and how to address those, then we can begin to see some light that will illuminate our path forward as we have this conversation and as we move as a state, I hope, towards policies that are more about healing and harm reduction and less about excessive punishment. Our organization, Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, or TADP, which is a little bit easier to say, we seek to honor life by working to end the death penalty, working to prevent violence, and supporting those who are victims of violent crime. Because we believe that all of these things are interconnected. The sad truth is that most, if not all, of the people who sit on Tennessee's death row were first victims of horrific violence. As children, usually, and for many years, usually. And if that trauma had been interrupted and properly addressed much, much earlier in their lives, many of the murders that led them to death row could have been avoided. We believe that if we want to find effective responses to crime, we should focus our resources, we should focus our energy on healing trauma and crime prevention, investing in trauma-informed solutions that center accountability, that center mental health, that center early intervention, solving more unsolved murders. Tennessee has a 50% unsolved homicide rate. Those are families who don't know what happened and who committed those crimes. Getting victims of violence and surviving family members of murder victims the resources they need so that their healing is not reliant on what happens to the people who have caused the harm. We are in a challenging moment. Amelia mentioned we've started executing again here in Tennessee, and there is an uptick in executions nationwide, but I stand by my belief that we are moving our state away from a reliance on the death penalty. 53% of Tennesseans, when polled and given alternatives, choose an alternative to the death penalty for first-degree murder. We had a 5-year pause when other states were executing around us, a 5-year pause with no executions just until this past May. And we've only had 4 new death sentences in Tennessee since 2013. That is the best indicator of the progress we are making. For comparison, in 1991, Tennessee sentenced 12 people to death in 1 year. Okay, so that is progress. We now, in our state, are seeking to execute people from a different time, sentenced to death decades ago, when we had limited understanding, limited tools, and I would argue limited vision. In May, after 5 years with no executions and with a lethal injection protocol relying on the chemical pentobarbital, that is somehow even more secretive and problematic than the protocol that went before, Tennessee executed Oscar Smith. Mr. Smith spent 30 years on death row before his execution. Then on August 5th, the state carried out an unconstitutional and torturous execution of a man named Byron Black. a man who is living with undisputed intellectual disability, which should have excluded him from execution, absolutely against Tennessee law and unconstitutional to execute people with intellectual disability, but because of a procedural hiccup and the lack of the governor's intervention, he was executed anyway. He was sentenced to death, Byron Black was sentenced to death in our state in 1989, the year I began here at Rhodes College. Think about that. I'm not afraid to tell you that was 37 years ago. He would have never been released. He would have never been released. Executing Byron Black was not an exercise of justice or accountability or public safety. It was an exercise of futility and retribution. Our state spent millions upon millions of dollars over the decades pursuing death for Mr. Black, while victim services in Tennessee remain woefully underfunded. And as I mentioned, half of all homicides go unsolved. These are dollars we are investing into the death penalty that could be spent on assisting surviving family members of murder victims like Cynthia, who you're going to hear more from in just a few minutes about what it's like to navigate that trauma and grief, and to have that exacerbated by the false promises of the death penalty system. This system, which does not make us safer, continues to be unfairly applied, with race, access to resources for one's defense, and the county you live in having more influence on whether or not you end up on death row than the crime itself. In fact, half of Tennessee's death row comes from one county. Can you guess? Half of Tennessee's counties have never sent anyone to death row. We know it's not fairly applied. And we don't get it right. At least 200 people since 1973 have been sentenced to death, only later to have been exonerated when evidence of their innocence was finally considered by some court somewhere, including Sabrina Butler-Smith. There's a man, and I hope we'll have a minute to talk about him, Robert Robertson of Texas, who is facing execution on October 16th in a case very eerily similar to Sabrina's. We have more difficult days ahead of us. Harold Nichols is a man who is scheduled to be executed here on December 11th. He's been on death row for decades. There are 12 others for whom dates have been requested. They just haven't been set yet. So there is much that we can do together to work to prevent these executions and to keep educating our state about why we should focus our resources elsewhere. Thank you for being here. I'm going to now sit, and I'm going to talk to Cynthia and Sabrina and get some of your questions too. Thank you. I'll share mine. So, we're gonna just kind of, we don't usually do it this way. We're trying this out with y'all of this sort of Q&A. Normally they would just share their stories, but I think for their sakes and for yours too, it may be better to break it up a little bit. So we're gonna try and see what happens. So we'll see. Cynthia, your stepfather, Donnie Johnson, was convicted of murdering your mom here in Memphis in 1984, and he was sentenced to death. You were, I believe, 7 years old at the time that that happened, and you and your brother were then left to live with your aunt, your mom's sister. Can you talk a little bit about that experience for you? What resources were available to you and your brother, to your aunt? And yeah, talk about that for a minute.
Oh. Take a bit. Y'all could have took. You got one yourself. Yeah, I can talk about that. There were no resources. There was nothing. I was 7, he was 4, and we were taken to live with the aunt, and that was it. We didn't have any kind of therapy. We didn't have anybody to talk to, anything. We actually ended up with a very alcoholic aunt, so that just added to a lot of it. But it's taken me 41 years, but there's therapy now. But there was so much anger, so much rage, I mean, I was 7, my mom's gone. All I could think about was who's gonna make my hot dog sandwiches? Who's gonna do that? Who's gonna tuck me in at night? And there was nobody, because my aunt wasn't gonna do it. The system kept giving Donnie dates, execution dates, to anybody who has a loved one who's been murdered is excruciating. It brings everything back up, everything. You think about what happened to your loved one. For my mother, I thought about what happened to her. How did she die? What are the details? So naturally, when I became an adult, I wanted to know, so I started researching, and I got a hold of court paperwork and autopsy reports, and I wish my therapist had been there before that, because that's not something that I recommend to anyone. Rage, I keep thinking rage, because I was so angry. I was angry all the time. I was a member of a death penalty forum online, pro-death penalty, and we were pretty vicious. We would find all the death penalty stories, any new case that came out or any that was coming back up for an appeal or an execution, we were on top of it. Me and all the pro-death penalty people. There was even one case that was local, and it was about this lady who had been convicted of killing her child. And since I was, from this area, that was my main case I was focused on. And I was convinced this lady did it. She needs to be executed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The court said she did it. But hello. That's her. We did a thing like this one time, and she's up there, and they introduced her, and I said, oh, I know that name. I know that. So I chased her down in the bathroom and told her, yeah, see, it's true. I was like, look, you don't know me, but I hadn't explained the whole situation. I was like, I'm sorry. I am sorry. After I got to go to death row, that's all I could do was apologize to her. And now we text every day. That's my girl right there. But yeah, no resources for anybody.
And just to follow up on that, Cynthia, I mean, I think it probably speaks for itself, but I'll let you speak to it as well. Do you think that that lack of resource for help for your aunt, for you, fueled your desire for the death penalty? Do you think that was part of the equation or not?
Oh, it was definitely part of it, because we didn't have any out. We had nobody to talk to. As a matter of fact, growing up, we weren't allowed to talk about my mother. So that just fueled the rage. And I keep thinking about all the things that I used to say and feel and do, and sometimes when I do these, it gets a little overwhelming. But yeah, it definitely fueled it, definitely.
Thank you. Sabrina, I'm gonna go to you for a minute. Yes, and I'm so glad you shared that, Cynthia, about that connection, that it was at an event just like this when this happened, and she realized, oh, that's Sabrina, who I wanted to be executed, and promoted her execution.
Oh, yes, I did.
So it's
and she still loves me.
and she does, absolutely. So Sabrina, tell us a little bit about the circumstances that led to the death of your little boy, Walter.
Well, first of all, the town that I lived in is about 3 hours from here. And at the time, I was only 17 years old. My son stopped breathing this particular night, and I've been on my own since I was 14. I was estranged from my mom. When he stopped breathing, I didn't know what to do. I panicked, and I ran for help in the apartments where I stayed. A lady on the end came out, she grabbed my son, put him on the floor, and she started CPR. Well, she told me what to do once I finally got somebody to take me to the hospital. I just was trying to get him to breathe. I didn't know what to do. I had never had any training, didn't know. I didn't have any family there at the time, I didn't know. So when I got to the hospital, they took him from me and they wouldn't let me go back. And I was standing in the emergency room part. And I kept pacing and I kept saying to myself, man, I'm in trouble. Cause I went jogging that night and I put my son to sleep and I left him in the house. Wasn't gone 10 minutes. That's when I found him unresponsive. But when I got to the hospital, the first thing I thought about was, I'm fixing to go to jail, I'm in trouble, for leaving my son at the house. I never thought that I would be going to jail for murder. That was the furthest thing from my mind. So I said to myself, I can't be honest. That's what kids do. You don't tell the truth. So when they started asking me questions, I lied because I panicked. I didn't know what to do. And so they told me that they couldn't save him. And at first, I thought it was a lie. I was looking at them like, everybody's, they're lying to me. I just thought they were trying to keep my son from me. So I went home that night after it happened. I couldn't wait for the sun to rise.
And so the next day you went back to the hospital?
Yes, I went back to the hospital because I wanted to know what happened. Not knowing that it takes time to do an autopsy report. The detectives were there and they said, I want to take you back down for more, to question me rather. So when I got to the police station, before I could sit down in the seat, they started yelling, they started screaming. This went on for like 4 hours. I was scared out of my mind. I did not know that, because I had never been to jail before. So I didn't understand my rights. I thought that you have the right to remain silent, meant be quiet until spoken to. I had nobody to talk to me, to tell me what to do in this moment. So the lead detective decided to write out a statement. He wrote it out and shoved it in my face and said, sign it. I was so scared because it was two guys. I signed the bottom of the paper. A lot of people say, well, if you didn't commit a crime, why would you sign it? You have to be interrogated by the police officers to know the tricks that they pull in order to get a confession out of you. So I signed it. But I said to myself, somebody gotta see this. Somebody's gotta know that this is not right.
And I'm gonna shake it up from what we said earlier and let you go ahead, Sabrina, and talk about what happened at your trial.
Well, when I signed the paper, they charged me with capital murder. They charged me with a child abuse statute that wasn't even a law until 23 days after I was already incarcerated. So they charged me with something that wasn't even legal. It wasn't even legal. I sat in the county jail for a whole year before I even saw my attorneys. I saw them 2 days before trial. When I got to trial, though, I had never had any preparations or anything, but when I looked at the jury, I knew my life was over because nobody looked like me. I had an all-white jury. And when I saw them, I said, my life's over. I mean, they're gonna throw me away. I knew it. I just knew it in my heart. I knew it. And I was right. They came back. They found me guilty. They sentenced, my death date was July the 2nd. I was sentenced March the 13th of 1990. My death date was July the 2nd. And by the time I got to death row, I was 19 years old. During the trial, I had a divorce attorney and a lead attorney. The divorce attorney was drunk during the whole trial. He was popping candy in his mouth saying, oh, we got this thing nipped in the bud. You don't have to take the stand. And I kept begging to take the stand in my own defense and was not allowed to do so. So when I got to death row, I was 19.
So we'll pick back up with you in a moment, death row. Cynthia, you decided as an adult that you wanted to visit your dad.
Yes. Yes.
At this point, you were still very much supportive of the death penalty.
Very supportive.
So tell us about why you wanted to go see Donnie and what you hoped to get from that encounter, and then what did happen.
Well, I wanted to go because I wanted to show him that despite what he did, I was okay. I made it. I'm a grown adult. I had beautiful children. I had a job, everything. That was my goal for going up there. That's not exactly, well, that did happen. Sorry, sometimes I get a little teary-eyed talking about this one.
Yeah.
I was petrified. I was so scared of him because I'd been taught ever since I was little, you know, he's evil, he's a killer. When I finally saw him, after I finally decided to look up and look at him, I did what I went up there to do. I told him completely off, things I cannot repeat in this institution. But that's what I went up there to do. And the second I got finished, I sat down, and I know this sounds insane, but I heard a voice that said, "That's it, let it go." And I looked at him and I said, "I can't keep doing this because hating you is killing me and it doesn't mean anything to you, so I forgive you." I did not mean to say those words. They automatically came out. But being able to go up there and face him, which is not a very common thing. As a matter of fact, the day I got there, they told me the whole prison was on lockdown because I was there. Because it was unheard of for a victim's daughter to go meet with the convicted killer of her mother. But since technically I was his daughter too, they let me in there. Hadn't I walked out of that prison that day, everything changed, everything. If I hadn't been able to go in there, I don't know, I would probably still be 100% pro-death penalty. I would probably still wonder why Sabrina got out, but I didn't. I got to go in there, as awful as that place was, and say what I had to say, and finally got the closure that people think comes with an execution. After he was executed, nothing in my life changed. It wasn't better, it wasn't worse. It's just he was gone, and I had nobody else to talk to about my mother. I couldn't growing up. He was the only place that I got information on her. I learned who she was. So I am eternally grateful for that day. What else do you want me to say?
I think you said it all. That's
Okay,
very
good.
good. Yes, thank you. So we're going from death row here in Tennessee to death row in Mississippi, where Sabrina found herself at 19. Tell us a little bit, Sabrina, about what that experience was like for you.
It's one experience that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. When I got there, I was shackled around my waist and my ankles, and I had to walk to what they call intake, where they take your clothes, they put bug spray in my hair, they changed everything that I had. My identity was 91452. I was in a 6x9 cell, no bigger than your bathroom, no human contact, and I stayed in that bathroom or that cell for 2 years, 9 months. I had rats in my cell, I had bugs on my tray, but the most scary part was my death day, which was July the 2nd. That part kind of upsets me because I can't believe that we have a system in place such as this that did not do what they should have done in my case. I paced the floors. I listened for every chain, every sound, because I actually thought that was the day that I was gonna die. Nobody talked to me. Nobody told me anything. So it was an inmate next door to me who was on death row at the time. And me and her became friends, and she kept telling me, "Sabrina, you haven't been back to court. They can't do anything. You gotta go to court to prove your case. You gotta go to court." So I ended up with 2 more attorneys who found out that my son had heart, kidney, and lung problems. It was no murder at all. My son had health issues. They were going to kill me, saying I committed a murder, which was never a murder. How does that work? How can you give me back what you took? When I got off death row, my sentence was overturned. I went back down to the lower courts, and it took the jury an hour to deliberate. I was exonerated, and I have been doing this for almost 30 years now. And I'm gonna continue to do it because I'm out in spite of the system. God has been my biggest and always will be my main supporter, because that's who brought me to where I'm at now. Today, I have a 22-year-old daughter that has the same disease my son died from. I never was given an apology, I'm sorry, or nothing. So now I'm trying to rebuild my life, what was taken from me, and I refuse to stop talking. As long as your mouth is closed, you will never get fed. That's the way I've always been taught. If you see something wrong, talk about it. Do something about it. Don't just ignore it, because this system is wrong for what it's doing. How can we as a people take somebody's redemptive period? You can't do that. We're not God. We're playing God with somebody else's life. And then you're asking people that work in the prison to kill somebody for you. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. But I'm here today in spite of the system.
And I'll just, if you want to maybe say a word, Sabrina, about Robert Robertson in Texas, because this is a case I mentioned, October 16th, Innocence Project. You can find information about this case. If you just want to say a word about how your cases are similar. And
Robert Robertson's case, he had a young daughter who had a lot of medical issues. And they accused him of killing her. And he also was autistic. And because he did not look a certain way or grieve a certain way, he was called a murderer and put on death row. And so now he's fighting for his life. And his case is similar to mine. But his daughter had double pneumonia. She had been in the hospital over 30 times. Something clearly was wrong. I just don't understand how we can say, to make a decision on somebody else's life and say that's correct or we're any better. Because killing is wrong no matter how you do it, correct? Correct? Okay. So why do we have that? The money we put in the death penalty, we should be putting in roads, bridges, education, mental health. What about mental health? There's a lot of things we can be doing with this money instead of waiting for somebody to sit on death row 30 and 40 years to kill them. It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Sabrina, you've kind of answered the last question, but I'll just open it up to both of y'all. What do you hope that people will take away from your experiences and your stories?
Me personally, that there's so many people who are affected by the death penalty, not just the victim and the convicted. There are children, grandchildren, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, and a lot of times, I know especially in our case, those people get forgotten. They just get a verdict and then they get forgotten. Nobody goes back and checks on them. Nobody says, hey, are you okay? Nobody makes sure the kids are okay, offers therapy, anything. They're forgotten.
And what I hope to take from it, just like she said, people are forgotten. We're exonerated. It's 200 of us from death row. But nobody got out and said, hey, man, I know you was on death row. Come on, let me take care of you. Come over here, let me give you a job. Let me give you a house. Let me give you this. When I got out, I had nothing. If it wasn't for my family, the family that I do have, my aunt is in the audience right now. If it was not for my family, where would I be? Raise your hand, Auntie. That's my auntie right there. And all I'm saying is there's a system that people think that's what's going on, but that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. African Americans are 4 times more likely to be put on death row than their counterparts. Something's wrong with that picture. There's so many of us in jail now. It makes no sense. It's got to be fair. If you are going to convict a person for murder, why not all the people that you're choosing for murder? Why is it John gets the death row, but Sam over here, he ain't got it? That don't make no sense. Murder is murder, correct? So everybody should have it. If you're gonna give somebody the death penalty, everybody should have it. That's the way I feel about it. But that's not what's happening. That's why we need to change the system. We need to, and we starting with you guys. That's why we be coming to the colleges. Hey dudes, y'all come on, do something.
Y'all are the ones that are gonna fix it.
Please do something.
Y'all are definitely
They're
the
killing
ones
us
that
out
fix
here.
it.
I'm getting old. I can't keep on doing it.
Hey now,
Y'all got to
Sabrina,
come
be
on.
careful, we're the same age.
I'm just saying. I'm getting old.
We're going to open it up for Q&A to make sure we have time for y'all's questions. But I will just to their point, the reality is, even if you believe the death penalty is justifiable in certain cases, we know there are horrific cases that happen. Terrible, terrible murders that we hear about. And even if you believe, you know what, they deserve it, death penalty is justified in this situation. The reality is the system we have cannot figure out who lives and who dies. It cannot be trusted to do that. And we're spending millions and millions of dollars to execute a handful of people in the grand scheme. I think there are 42 on death row right now in Tennessee, which is 42 too many. But when you're talking about the number of homicides that happen out there every day, right? Those families, the people who've committed those crimes, if they've even been arrested, most of them are not going to get the death penalty, right? So we're spending all this money to execute people 30 years after the fact, people who are already incarcerated, right? They're already incarcerated. Meanwhile, families like Cynthia's are getting no help. Our organization is doing a campaign called the Heal People campaign. My colleague Rafia lost her son to murder 5 years ago. And we are going all over the state talking to victims of violence and their families and finding out what is it you need and is anyone helping you. And what we're learning is the Victims Compensation Fund here in Tennessee, we've been doing work on it. It denies a lot of people help. In 2023, 70% of victims who applied for help are denied. Now, some of the work we've done to change legislation is going to improve that, but a lot of people need a lot of help that they're not getting. And this is going to impact down the road cycles of violence, right? That's where we need to be investing our resources. In the people, in the communities that are hurting now. So anyway, thank you all. Thank you, and let's get questions. I don't know if anybody?
Anybody have a question? Anybody? I don't know, somebody.
Who has it? Oh, yes. We probably do need to, will that reach? Before I can repeat.
I am Professor Daphne Whitaker's wife, and I actually am a criminal justice teacher at Lemoyne College. I think y'all came to Lemoyne several years ago.
We did.
Oh, I'm in tears as well. I mean, a life is a life, but tell me the cost. You mentioned the cost, and I didn't have time to read the information. I got other questions, but I'm just, that's the main one.
Yeah, and we do have an information table out there. I'm glad you mentioned it. It does have a lot of this information out on the table. Basically, the studies that have been done, the comprehensive ones around the country, show that the death penalty is generally about $2 million more per case than the alternative sentences over the lifespan of that case. So at least $2 million more per case. Tennessee has never done a comprehensive study. The comptroller did a report back in 2003 and really did not dig deeply into the data, I'll put it that way, and still found that at every stage the death penalty costs more, with the trial being the most expensive part of the case. It's about 50% more to have a capital trial than a non-capital trial. And there are people in Tennessee that have been tried capitally 3 times and are not on death row right now. So that's the kind of money, we're spending this money over time. And then basically giving people life sentences and the death penalty.
Thank you.
Yes.
What do you think the best thing, like the biggest thing that we can do is to help victims and their families?
Did y'all hear the question? What can be done? Well, I think that, there are organizations out there. There's various organizations that are working to support victims and their families. I think also talking to your lawmakers about making sure that victims' compensation is adequate and is getting to folks. Also, I think just to help people know that it's available, what we're finding is many people who've been impacted by violence do not have any idea that there's anything out there for them that they can go to help with burial costs, to help with mental health counseling, to help with relocation services. They just don't know. So we need to educate people about that. But I think that helping people understand the amount of money we're investing on the excessive punishment side of the equation and not on the victim support in terms of these kind of resources. People don't think about that, and we need to step back and think about the ways that we're investing those resources.
While you were on death row, did you encounter anyone else in a similar circumstance, like people that were exonerated or should have been exonerated or were there unjustly?
I think maybe when I was there, I think it was two people. One lady was mentally, and you knew that she didn't know, and she had no baby, but she didn't have the death penalty. They only gave her 15 years. She put a baby in the microwave. She had 15 years, but she was gone. You know what I mean? Then it was two other ladies. So I saw maybe out of the three, the two of them were innocent, and one, the lady, the microwave. I just don't think she was there. But in answering your question, I was on a hall that nobody hardly could come down, so I couldn't really see, a lot of people. I didn't have any contact with anybody, so that's the way it was, except for the girl that was on death row with me at the time.
I think the statistic is 4% of people on death row right now are likely innocent, which I think is about 100 people. And we already have 200 that have been exonerated since 1973. We also know of people that almost certainly were executed who were innocent. And I'm really worried about Robert Robertson in Texas. I mean, it has become a battle. And it is a bipartisan support for Mr. Robertson. I mean, the Texas legislature passed a bill and then updated the bill to say if you were sentenced under what they call the junk science, or science that's no longer considered appropriate or provable, then you should be able to get back into court. It was shaken baby syndrome is what they said killed his child. The overwhelming evidence from all the medical records, from everything, says that is not what killed his child, and they're no longer able to use shaken baby syndrome when they're pursuing murder charges for people. But the courts won't let him back in. And so the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, have been pushing to try to get him back into court, and the governor and the attorney general refuse to allow it to happen. So it's become this, as is often the case with high profile situations like this, a political battle that shouldn't be. This is, the evidence is overwhelming here that this man did nothing but take care of his little girl.
And it shouldn't be like that. Why do you have
Right.
to, if you have evidence of being innocent, why is it so hard for you to get into court? They were quick to put you in there and say you're guilty. Why can't you let you prove your innocence? So to me, I think that's a joke, because the guy that they just killed, they gave him a hip replacement and a heart replacement just for him to be able to walk to the death penalty chamber to get killed. That's crazy. What, I mean, come on, that don't make no sense. Why did they have to, you can't get a hip replacement out here, let alone, I'm just saying, it don't make no sense. So you're gonna make the guy, look like a robot just to kill him? Just for it to look good?
That Sabrina's referring to Byron Black that I
Yeah.
mentioned, who was executed
it's crazy.
in August here, and who had intellectual disability.
Yes.
And Byron was convicted of triple murder, heinous, his girlfriend and her little girls. He had this intellectual disability that should have precluded him from getting the death penalty, not from going to prison, but from getting the death penalty.
Right.
He had horrific health problems, including heart problems. his hips had deteriorated, and what Sabrina's referring to is he got a hip replacement, and they had to give him a defibrillator in order to do the hip replacement to try to repair his hip. And the only thing we can figure, since his hips had been disintegrating for decades, is that they were trying to make it so he could walk into the execution chamber. That didn't happen. He had to be held under the arms and pulled in. But that's what she's referring to, yeah.
Makes no sense. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, good, lots of questions now, good.
I wanted to ask, did you ever find out what happened to your first attorney? Did he continue practicing law?
The divorce attorney, no, they charged him with ineffective assistance of counsel. He was a drunk, you know, he just couldn't do the law, and he had no business on my case. I think what happened in my case, you know how you stand out in the hallway, you see on TV where they just take the book and they say, hey, you get this case, you take that case. I think that's what happened to my case. That's why I saw them 2 days before trial. They didn't do any preparation. They didn't even know what was going on. I think my case was handed to them in the hall. I actually think that, because of the way that they did it. They didn't call any witnesses in my case. Not even the girl that did the CPR on my son. They didn't call anybody.
And the unfortunate thing is, in some of these cases, like Sabrina's and unfortunately Robert Robertson's too, his own defense counsel thought he was guilty.
Yeah.
They didn't do the work. They didn't look into it. They agreed with the prosecutors. I don't know if your counsel was appointed or public
He
defenders.
was a public defender.
Well, you know, we have excellent public defenders in this state, and they work very, very hard and have huge caseloads. But there are lawyers appointed and otherwise who just aren't in a position to be able to defend people for their lives. They're not getting paid enough. They may have
My case was
addictions and
12
other
and
things.
above.
Yeah,
They got 12.
so there's, you know, the lack of counsel and the ability to access counsel that is competent and that is resourced and has the resources they need to put on what is the most complicated kind of a case. It's just not there for a lot of people that get charged with capital murder. But yes.
In your opinion, like, even if the death penalty were to be removed, is like the prison system, in your opinion, I guess, justifiable? Or is it even effective? Or, I guess, preventing people from wanting to do crime? Or, like, is it suitable for certain types of crimes? Do you believe that there should be, like, a better, or, like, at least different, I guess, response to when someone has committed a crime, and if so, what would that look like?
I think that there should be an overhaul in the prisons as well. But prisons tend to have their own justifiable system. So with me being charged with killing my child, I had to fight every day to stay alive. So they basically take care of themselves. If a person doesn't have the death penalty and they're in there for murder, just like, who am I gonna say, what was his name, who was eating the people? Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer. He didn't last in prison because they made sure that the people killed him inside of the prison. So what I mean to say, and I hate to sound like that, but that is the way it is. It's not no joke in jail. I don't care if they put water beds in there. I'm not going back in there. I don't care what they do, because it is a horrible situation. You are not your own, and people take advantage of you. There's rapes, there's murders, there's all kind of things already in jail, which I think that they should have more rehabilitation. They say they rehabilitate you, but they don't. They create monsters inside of there, because the people come in and they mistreat the inmates, you know, and they don't have health care. The women's part of it is horrible. There's nothing that you can get, like personal stuff that a woman may need. They don't care. They don't care about you in there. So the prison needs an overhaul, not just an institution to make money. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're housing people, but they're not training them like they should and teaching them, why is it that you committed this crime or you did whatever you did? They're not doing any of that. They just throw people in jail like a bunch of cattle, and then they mistreat them.
And I think, to Sabrina's point, I mean, obviously, the entire system needs to be overhauled. I mean, we are warehousing people. Prisons, I mean, there are people who do oftentimes on their own work on their own rehabilitation, but it is not it is not an institution that is set up for rehabilitation. It's an institution that's set up to punish. And, you know, particularly a lot of the tough on crime talk, you send a juvenile in, there have been 2 or 3 cases in the last few years where we have heard of a kid getting in trouble, being sentenced as an adult, going in, coming out 20 years later, far worse than when they went in. And had we put the money and the resources and the focus on that child, whatever was going on with that child, when things started to go haywire at the, you know, 12 years old, 13 years old, and not thrown this kid away and put them in there, maybe that could have been different, right? And so, yes, there are times when people need to be separated, to time out. The community has to be safe, but we could be doing it so differently, where the goal was to address the issues that led to the violence so that they can be addressed within the person and within the context that that person found themselves that led them to that act. Does that make sense? Yeah.
For both of y'all, how would you say that your experiences with like the justice system and just the things that you've been through affect your life and your lives now?
Go first.
No, as far as mine, when I got out, it took me 10 years to get where I'm at now. I certainly don't trust the police. And I was like kind of a loner, you know, with people, just having to learn how to fit back into society. It's very hard because I didn't have any mental health, you know, nothing to help me to fit back in society. I had to figure it out. So now I'm better, you know, a lot better than I was, but it's been a struggle. It's been very hard because no programs for me as well wasn't there, because I'm a victim of the state as well as her being a victim. I lost my son and then victimized by the state at the same time. So it was very hard for me.
When it comes to the death penalty, the state gave Donnie tons of stays of execution, and then he would get a new execution date, and then that would get a stay of execution. And that's torture for us. It really is. One minute you think your life's going okay, and the next minute you're thrown back into everything that happened when you were 7 because there's a new execution date. But we always knew that it was never going to follow through. And what year was it? 16?
2019.
2016, I think, is when I went up there. So yeah, now that he's been executed, it's still, every time the TV pops up with an execution date or a death row inmate, it brings it all back, every bit of it.
This is just a little bit of a tangent, but I thought of it because I do think people forget that, you know, Byron Black's case, Cynthia's case with Donnie and her mom, they're one of our board members, Tim Holton. It is not unusual for this to be a family where the person who murders is a father, a brother, a husband, right? It's a family trauma and tragedy. And so what you end up seeing is families at the time when they need to be the most unified and supportive of each other, splitting apart because this person and this person doesn't want dad to get executed, but this person and this person think dad deserves to be executed. And I've seen it over Oscar Smith too. I mean, I've seen it so many times, and we forget, you know, what this is doing to the very people the death penalty is supposed to be helping. It can rip family. And I know Cynthia went through a whole lot when Donnie was executed because of the work she's doing now. And imagine that, all these years, and then at the time when her dad is being executed, family is upset and angry at each other. I mean, that's what it does to people.
They still haven't spoken to me.
One more question. And we'll hang around, so if y'all have questions, come find us and I'll get you in the back there.
Hi, thank you all for sharing tonight, first of all. It's been like a really amazing experience to sit here and hear like everyone's testimony
Well, I think Amelia and Mitchell are getting ready to maybe put something up on the screen. We definitely have an action that you can take tonight to send Governor Lee a letter, a little QR code deal, right? And to tell him to please stop executions for all these reasons that we're talking about. We will also be doing that. We have sign-up sheets out on the table to get on our email list, or you can do that on your phone too, on our website, TennesseeDeathPenalty.org. That's how you're gonna know when things are coming up. We're sending Governor Lee this letter now. We will have specific information around Harold Nichols within the next month or so. His execution is scheduled for December. And in terms of legislation, yes, we are looking right now at working on more around victims' compensation and ways that we can broaden that, and some other things that we can do to maybe reduce the scope of the death penalty. You can find out all that stuff by getting on our email list. That's the best way.
What a perfect transition.
I have to say your words were extremely meaningful and powerful to me, both Cynthia and Sabrina, and I feel like I speak on behalf of the crowd when I say that. So could we please show them another round of applause?
And like they just perfectly transitioned to, we want to talk about some real, tangible, concrete ways that today, no matter who you are, no matter what you can do, if you can scan that QR code on the left, you can immediately reach out to Governor Lee. Oh, excuse me, right here. On the right. On the left. No, my left. To stop executions here today. It doesn't matter. As long as we get your voice, that is tangible, real impact that can happen right now.
And on the right side, you'll see we have a QR code where you all can sign up, and Ben Hayes, our treasurer in the back that checked you in, will set you up with an address. You can take an envelope today that is already stamped in the lobby on your way out so that we can pair you with someone on death row to write to.
Excuse me, sorry. We'll give you all a few minutes. We're gonna leave these up for a few seconds. Besides that, y'all, thank you for being here. Please check out some pizza. Please check out some amazing organizations. It takes a crowd. It takes a village.
Can we give it up one more time for our incredible guests? Thank you all for coming to join us tonight.